in Qajar, Iran, right?
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to dive right into this then. When defining the older term prostitute fahshe used in Qajar, Iran, there are several definitions and synonyms listed in the dictionary. The obvious ones appear, such as jende, whore, khod furush, a person who sells oneself, but other attributes appear, such as marufe, a famous woman, namasdur, uncovered or unveiled, although I was having a debate with someone that doesn't mean that, but all right. And harjoyi, one who is everywhere. Harjoyi is also listed as an antonym for najib or noble. The contemporary word for prostitute, ruspi, was not really in use until the Pahlavi dynasty, when the institution of prostitution became further regulated and more hidden from the public view. When discussing her photo collage series, The Inheritance, photographer Yasemin Ameri describes the photographs of 19th century women she appropriates as fahshe, public women. Several women in Ameri's original photographs have also been labeled khanum, which in Tehrani slang of the 19th century could have meant prostitute, brothel madam, or a woman on the street, because any woman on the street must have been a streetwalker, a whore, right? It was not polite to refer to a woman directly as khanum. Women in unfamiliar, formal, or public settings were usually addressed as aga, with their husbands' names rather than their own. This presentation is an examination of how photography possibly changed and impact the institution of prostitution in Qajar, Iran. The concept of the public or famous woman was a prescription applied to prostitutes since the Safavid period or even earlier, while virtuous and politically powerful women remained unseen, working behind the scenes of power as opposed to being the face of power, hence the dichotomy of fahshe and najib. With this type of dichotomy, singers, dancers, musicians, and other female entertainers historically fell under the rubric of prostitute because they exposed that which should be orat. Hence, the term fahshe included all public women. For the female singer, a woman's voice is also considered orat, so just hearing a woman's voice without even seeing her was an invitation into her personal space and thus making her a public woman. Moreover, the main quality of a prostitute in 19th century Iran was that she was visible and public space by being synonymous with male space. Photography as a medium disturbed the balance between the visible unchaste woman and the invisible chaste woman, and also the political noble harem woman. On one hand, photography was patronized by the royal women of the court, and on the other hand, public women were being photographed, thus leaving the social groups in between, except for certain ethnic groups, as both unrepresented and unrepresentable. Although royal Qajar women broke the taboo of having themselves not only photographed but also painted when before only the ideal was permissible, the photograph was ultimately an extension of the fahshe's presence in Qajar society and communicated as such, so that photography was mostly beyond the realms of ordinary everyday women until more all-female studios began to increase in number and women played a more active role in assisting their husbands and fathers in the photography studio. Furthermore, the fahshe, much like prostitutes in other countries in the 19th century, became emblematic of a new kind of modernity in Iran, what was both reviled and rejected, but they were also promoters of a new kind of public woman who would emerge during the Pahlavi dynasty. Through a growing presence of photographic erotica industry in Tehran in the late 19th century, the access to a famous fahshe became widespread, which had only once been a financial right of kings and noblemen during the Safavids to possess a famous courtesan. Thus, women's photographs trespassed many spaces of various men. But this photographic production also created a cult of famous fahshe from across society, not solely the privileged courtesan prototype. Furthermore, not only did photography make famous prostitutes available to all men, rich, poor, Iranian, foreigner, it also made it possible for average, ordinary prostitutes to reach a type of fame that only their courtesan counterparts could have achieved in the past. This is not to imply choice or desire to perform sex work, but only to suggest through the medium of photography, women could create personas and a type of glamour that had not been available before to a common prostitute. This sort of prestige only came through performing in the royal courts in the past, and with the advent of photography, the royal courts could be bypassed. Although there were suggestive photographs of boy entertainers and male actors, this paper only focuses on women, which follow the commodification more closely, as well as the concept of being a public woman is under examination, who existed in an all-male public sphere. There are erotic images of boys painted on various objects, such as pen boxes, and some marketed photographs, for example, by Antoine Severguin. But typically, the photographs do not have the extensive labeling, numbering, categorization, and menu-like collaging that the photographs and catalog sheets that the Fauché have, which indicated that there was both a trading photograph industry as well as celebrity of these women, i.e. that men were specifically asking for and collecting certain photographs by a woman's name. During the Safavid dynasty, the capital city of Isfahan was home to around 14,000 to 40,000 prostitutes of various social strata out of a population of approximately 500,000, servicing men from all walks of life. The discrepancy in number, which is high regardless, lies in who was actually registered as a prostitute because the institution was taxed by the Safavids. Many women did not register for this reason and chose to keep their identities secret. Theoretically, anyone could be a prostitute or visit one, even the most impoverished man, as there were sex workers available at all prices, be they rich courtesans, brothel prostitutes, prostitutes working out of their own homes, and streetwalkers, not only in Isfahan, but in other cities as well, such as Ghazvin and Shiraz. But the bustling commerce and traffic of all kinds of men from all over the world into Isfahan made the city a thriving metropolis full of potential buyers and sellers of sex commerce. The profession of prostitution itself during the Safavids was a public one, easily seen and not hidden from the average Iranian or foreigner. Although prostitutes did veil to some degree like other women, their veiling was not comprehensive or modest. Courtesans, however, quote, showed their faces in public when they went out riding, end quote, and wore expensive clothing that further drew attention to themselves. Even though most women and girls and boys were forced into the sex trade, ultimately courtesans held a higher position than their other prostitute counterparts. Though prostitution and the dichotomy of public-private women existed before the Safavids, what is of concern here, and with the later connection of photography, was that the Safavids' celebrity of courtesans emerged in pictures and became a practice of collecting pictures by the king and the elite. There were also pictures of common prostitutes from this period, however unknown or just prototypes. There was the production of single-page paintings produced during the 1500s, which included the revival of the Iranian nude as well as illustrated erotica books. Furthermore, a market of images emerged of women to be bought and sold, from Reza Abbasi's nudes on a single page of paper to less quality drawings, and finally the elite's commissioning of sophisticated paintings of known public women. What this phenomenon amounted to was the possession of these women in various degrees. Public women who belonged to all, but to none, would be sold again on another market for the sole possession of one proprietor. In Qajar, Iran, by all accounts, both primary and secondary, Iranian and foreign, prostitution was rampant and for the most part unregulated. Although the Qajar state received tax revenues from prostitution much like the Safavids, and therefore did not infringe on the institution too much except to make cruel, violent examples of women on occasion, it did not generally control sex commerce or the venereal disease it spread. Because poverty seemed to have been widespread through the country, this forced many women, girls, and boys into prostitution to finance the basic needs of survival. Based on these historical narratives, there were many types of prostitutes, many prostitutes available, and the average person could witness a prostitute in society on a daily basis, especially in large cities such as Tehran, Tabriz, and Ghazvin. In the early 20th century, the high number of female prostitution became viewed as a symptom of weak political male authority, that men could not control women and their bodies in the public sphere, hence signifying a deep neurosis of prostitutes who symbolized the loss of masculinity and the state of Iran not being functional. In delineating a history of prostitution in Qajar, Iran, Saeed Mandani Ghafaroqi mentions photography as an archival mean in understanding that history. Although he does not elaborate, he infers a phenomenon that breaks with the past, as these were not only the first photographs of Iranian prostitutes, but ultimately the art form would alter how the institution was practiced. With the advent and dissemination of photography abroad in Iran, we are presented with the problem of taking photographs of women, as the photograph is an extension of the public and also a commodity in possession. The first Iranian women photographed were in fact royal women who accepted photography immediately, although the process in the 1840s was the daguerreotype, which produced only positive prints, meaning only one image could be produced. There was no negative to create multiple images of a sitter, hence circulation was limited to the original image. Each special photograph was the woman's own memento, and the difficulty in viewing the image on silver-coated plates and the overall cumbersome nature of the daguerreotype will not lend to mass production. By the way, these are not daguerreotypes. I just took it off the Safavids, but I'll tell you when we get to this one. Although it is speculative, when the gelatin process arrived in Iran, it would facilitate fast, quick, and cheap circulation. It was invented in the 1870s, but some argue it did not reach Iran until the early 20th century. Yet, according to Qajar Cordior Ain al-Sultaneh, by 1891, there were several photograph shops that sold images of famous women in Tehran, whom he describes as mashhur or maruf, which clearly indicated that these women were fahishe. Quote, I went to the bazaar, I bought 9 photographs of famous women. There were many photographs of women. Most of them were bad in quality, end quote. There were photography kiosks that specifically marketed photographs of women, pasted them onto cards. They were printed on photographic printing out paper, as you can see, that could be easily cut and disseminated. This usage of paper that would indicate a much cheaper market to sell to larger audiences, not just expensive images to Europeans and Iranian elites. Also, the quality of the reproductions, sometimes photographs of photographs, was very poor. These photographs of women were meant for trading because they typically have some sort of indication, such as a number, a title simple as Khanum, or a name that was probably a nickname or stage name. Her name is Marzieh, but you can't see it. There it is. But her little label is right there. Her name is Marzieh. All right. The overall spaces of these photographs are small and compressed, each showing the woman up close and isolated. In 1894, Ain al-Sultaneh describes going to another photographic shop in which the photographs of women were for sale. The shop was near a street where both men and women prostituted themselves. Quote, there was a photography shop. It had photographs of women. The photographer had taken all of them himself, and he knew all their names and positions well, but most were in poor shape and quality, end quote. Okay, got 2 more pages. Photographing the female body in any context with an invitation to circulate and to form a trafficking, I don't know what I wrote here. Photographing the female body in any context was an invitation to circulation and a form of trafficking its images for consumption. 19th century France became the site of the proto-pinup girl, the carte de visite of burlesque actresses who sought to maximize their public presence through photography. In Marie Robert's The Photographer, the Model, and the Body, she discusses the dynamic relationship between the photograph of the model, the photographer, and the male buyer of the photograph, comparing the photographer as a type of pimp and the consumer as a John or voyeur, and transforming Roland Barthes' triad of operator, spectrum, spectator. Furthermore, the photographer's studio was a site of sexual fantasy, fetish, and desire, producing imagery to fulfill the proclivities of a male clientele. The result was the ultimate commodification of the model body. Not only is her body up for sale, but her image as well. And because of this, the model is seen as a prostitute, really, even if she was not in actuality. Similar to the Qajar case, prostitutes and female entertainers in other countries during the 19th century used photography to circulate and to brand themselves in the public sphere, creating a visual celebrity. In most cases, this increase in the production of women's images created was correlated to an influx of commerce, trade, and foreigners. There was a growing buying public for these photographs. In Qing, China, courtesans used photography to market their beauty in hopes of increasing their clientele, especially after Shanghai became a major commercial center after the 2 Opium Wars. Like Wan Peng argues that under such conditions and with photography, courtesans became the first modern celebrities in China. And in fact, while many Chinese did not participate in photography, it was the courtesans who first explored photography as sitters and were instrumental in developing photographic portraiture. By the 1880s, American cigarette companies such as Caporal and Amaral would include a souvenir photograph of burlesque actresses and their cigarettes, which would be this collage of photographs in the middle, not only to admire and to trade, but also to keep the cigarette pack sturdy. In Meiji, Japan, geishas, especially new and inexperienced ones who had just finished their training, used photographs to demonstrate their dancing and musical talents. Images of geishas became national symbols after Japan was forcibly opened in 1854, and the arrival of many foreigners to Japan led to the patronization of souvenir photography. Although the status of the... All right, I can just go to my conclusion. All right, so my big point was, what I want to bring to light here was how these types of photographs of fauché created an extension of a public woman even further by turning the average prostitute and not just an elite courtesan into a mater fait. According to Walter Benjamin's milestone, the work of art in its age of technical reproducibility, he argues that mass-produced images lose the aura of the original artwork. But that loss of the aura would be transmitted elsewhere, and that was through the human continents in photography and later film. In this way, the mass production of photography and trading cards of the fauché not only made them a commodity and a possession, but also, I lost my place, but also a kind of celebrity for them that was only accorded to the king's courtesans and other female court entertainers. Thus, there was socially no place for a famous courtesan when Muzaffar al-Din Shah was having an affair with the famous singer Keshvar Shahi, whose image was technically for sale to anyone. In the age of the Tobacco Revolt and the Constitutional Revolution, during which men became citizens, the politicization of the public sphere also offered the potential of purchasing the services of sex workers who had also serviced the king, and also these images were bought and sold by the poor and the elite, such as Ain al-Sultanate, thus leveling the playing field of available sex or the fantasy thereof. So what was sacrosanct or limited to the king himself as the absolute ruler was by the end of the 19th century not at the same caliber, and because photography democratized sex and sex work in Qajar society for both the John and the fauché, although I mean that the average prostitute could gain celebrity in late Qajar society without being a courtesan, not that her being in sex work itself was a democratic decision. Returning again to the dichotomy of fauché and Najib, this is where photography meets in the middle. It was where mostly women of the court, ethnic groups such as Armenian women, and fauché who took advantage of the power and potential of photography. The photographs of the fauché and the stolen images of harem women that were put into circulation, as well as the writings of women, began to change the dominance of the all-powerful male sphere. Women were writing, women were unveiling, and women's photographs were being disseminated in public, thus infiltrating the male sphere on every single level. This would no doubt lead to the public demonstrations by women such as Zainab Pasha and Tabriz during the tobacco protest. Furthermore, both the fauché and Najib were experimenters with poses and also with fashion, spreading trends throughout the country, becoming modern innovators of culture. I'm going to finish. Although I am not suggesting that the photographs of fauché led to the gradual acceptance of women's presence in the public sphere and its modern transportation, but by seeing women unveiled and dressed fashionably, these photographs certainly have their place. When looking at photographs of fauché, they foretell that the photographs would be produced of average middle-class women in the late Qajar and early Pahlavi years. Indeed, cultural production, both high and low, always prepares us for the future that we will eventually accept. In this sense, the fauché, the public woman, would foreshadow Iranian women after the Kashf hijab, when all Iranian women would theoretically become public.
Cool.